Perhaps you've heard the phrase, the contact center is not a cost center. The idea behind that is great contact centers drive customer loyalty and revenue by creating great experiences. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be efficient or that they should be immune to cost-cutting measures. Every company should be mindful of costs, but cutting costs for the sake of cutting costs can end up costing a lot more in the long run. To discuss how to cut costs responsibly, I talked with Brad Cleveland, author, speaker, and consultant known globally for his expertise in customer strategy and management. Brad was a founding partner of ICMI, the International Customer Management Institute, and served as the CEO for more than a decade. His most recent book, Leading the Customer Experience: How to Chart a Course and Deliver Outstanding Results, is a guide to shaping experiences that win loyalty and deliver outstanding business results. On this week's episode of Next in Queue, Brad and I discuss customer access strategies, and the value of cross-training, otherwise known as pooling, deflection beyond self-service, different methods to listen to the voice of the customer, and how workforce optimization relates to organizational culture. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy2, your service team's personal coach, giving them the process, resources, and insights to deliver the perfect customer experience over the phone. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Thanks for joining another episode of Next in Queue. Today, I am joined by the illustrious Brad Cleveland. Brad, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Rob, I'm doing great. Oh, illustrious. I've got to try to follow that.
Well, I'm trying to use up all my 25-cent words, and that was today's. So there you go.
That's a 50-cent word, that one.
Well, with inflation, yes, it is probably a
right
50-cent word now. Speaking of inflation, today we're going to talk about actually reining in costs responsibly within your contact center. So I'm really excited to have you on. We talked about doing this quite some time ago, and I think it's really timely now as we get to the end of the year. All kinds of companies are thinking about their budgets for 2023. We've seen a rash of layoffs at all kinds of companies who are concerned about their expenditures. And so I think a lot of people, business leaders, are thinking very critically about their budgets for the coming year. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to talk with you about how we can do that, but also not create an entire mess when we go about it.
The wrong approach backfires quickly and severely.
Yes, yes, it does.
You just can't take the wrong steps. You're gonna have an exit out the back door and long queues and damage to your brand and all sorts of things that you don't want to go there. It's not gonna reduce costs for sure, and going to cause all kinds of problems.
So what I'm hearing you say already is that I shouldn't just slash across the board. Just look at my budget for 2022, take 20% off the top and say, well, that's the budget for 2023. That's a bad idea?
Well, you're smiling as you ask that. We've all experienced as customers what happens when that sort of one size fits all approach happens. And, I've been around this space for a long time, and I'm dating myself here, but I remember the late 90s, early 2000s, the recession we had then, and there were cuts across the board. It was disaster. And this was before social media. I have a file cabinet. I'd have to do some digging now. It's in the long time ago archives, but I've got a filing cabinet of mainstream news articles on the disaster that was from a customer's perspective. And a lot of companies really paid a severe price. So yeah, don't do that. Don't cut costs the wrong way. It's not going to work for you.
So, in the news fairly recently, for those that don't pay attention to the kinds of things that you and I pay attention to, Frontier Airlines, they recently just eliminated voice service altogether. If you call in to their toll free number now, you get a recording. It says, hey, hit us up in one of these other channels, which includes bot, chat, SMS, I believe. They've got some different options. We don't necessarily need to talk about the implications of that. I think we'll see how things work out for Frontier. But I do want to talk about customer access, because that is one company saying, you know what, we are just eliminating a channel. So talk to me a little bit about the different ways that you can change customer access strategically, and what things people should be thinking about as they go through that process of thinking about what they can do to manage access.
Yeah. And that is an interesting decision on Frontier's part. And a lot of times things are going to go just fine, but get stuck in a snowstorm, pull out that little device you're carrying around in your pocket and start typing away. What could go wrong? And I've sat next to probably thousands of agents over the years who use chat, and it works great when chat works well. Chat doesn't work well when it's not something that lends itself to chat. Stating the obvious, aren't I? And try to handle the volume of customers around these problems that the airlines run into. And I wonder if the 8 and 9 hour wait times for the mainstream, the mainline carriers last year, and it's gotten a lot better this year. I wonder if that suggests there's any demand there. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be incredibly frustrating on the agent's end of things. Trying to and they mentioned 3 chat conversations. My daughter, who's 20, can type as fast as I can talk. To do that with 3 people at one time and see how that works out for you. I just don't get it. But we shall see, as you say. Customer access. It's a great place to start for anything, cutting costs, growing your presence, really shaping the kind of brand that you want. Start with your customer access strategy. So talking about what customers are you serving, the contact types, the access alternatives that you're putting out there, phone, chat, text, self-service, all of that, and go through methodically what that looks like. So I remember a wireless organization that was going through deep water. They've since really turned things around, but they grew their contact center services to help with the turnaround. They had suggestions that we need to cut costs across the board. They were trying to retain customers. So easy access, helping them get into the plans that made sense for them, helping them resolve some of the questions they had. By boosting their contact center, they were able to boost their revenue and really turn things around. So start with your customer access strategy and what you're trying to do overall.
Something that I think we should talk about that you just mentioned there is, when you're looking at a budget, it's not always about cutting things, because at the end of the day, it's about revenue and the cost to generate that revenue. And so sometimes it does make sense to actually spend a little bit more if that means that your revenue is going to go up significantly, whether it's retention or access to new customers, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. And sometimes you need to spend to cut costs. I remember working with a consumer products company, and this is an example I cite because if a consumer products company with commodities can do this, anyone can. but their contact center was not a great place to work. They had high turnover. Their team, they brought me in to, kick some things around with their team. Their team had all kinds of ideas, but they hadn't asked them, what do you guys think we should do? So they got their foot in the door so they could get on to, better jobs as those doors opened up internally. But one of the things that their team came up with when we asked, hey, how could you create more value, is, what's really driving this work? And with a little analysis, they discovered that 11% of the contacts they were getting on one of their spray cleaning products, again, these are commodities, was because the cap was hard to remove. So you'd buy it and take it home, and all too often force the cap off and shear off the nozzle, so it wouldn't work. So throw it away. Well, they began to really listen to their customers and track what was the drivers of this work, and they were able to show that to their packaging supplier, who redesigned the cap, and those contacts went away. 11% of the work on one of their products went away because they were able to, analyze what was driving it and take measures to fix it. So sometimes you have to spend to cut costs, and a contact center is a great place to look for those opportunities because we're such powerful eyes and ears.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm curious what your thoughts are, I feel like the last 5-ish years has been for contact centers and support teams, a time where we just add channels, give choice, more choice for customers to contact us. And we just talked about, Frontier eliminating one of those choices. I mean, what should we be looking at when we're trying to determine what channels we offer?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it starts with your customer access strategy, where you're talking through as a cross-functional team, what kinds of issues come up with the different customer segments, different customer types that you have, which simply helps you understand their needs and requirements. So start with your customers, and then what kind of work is that going to drive? There was a food company in Europe that decided they would cut weekend service. In fact, they eliminated weekend service hours. So save a little money. They distributed a product that was tainted. Their customers and this happened at the end of a work week. Their customers began contacting them. Hey, something's funny about this product. No one was there to hear, and the thing developed in this full-blown crisis over the weekend. By Monday morning, it had been picked up by the news. There were no deaths or anything. It could have been worse, but it was a lot of people got sick. It was a real impact on their brand, and they later calculated they could have kept the contact center open for 100 years on weekends, next to what they paid to get this thing resolved, and the impact on their brand. So start with your customer access strategy. What might happen? If you're a utility with down power lines, you'd never think twice about being there 24/7, being available for 24/7. Gas leaks, down power lines, that sort of thing. You have to be there. That's common sense, right? But there's but all of these decisions are common sense when we lay out what could happen and where we really need to be there for our customers. It's not a mystery. One thing you do have to do is make sure you've got one plan you're operating from, and not. I was in an insurance company a while back. They had 3 different customer access strategies. One was primarily in IT, one was in marketing, and one was in the customer service area. And ask how well that went. So, so we have to work from one plan, singing the same song. So start with one plan, but just lay out methodically. And I've got a form on my website. There's no gate or anything. The 10 components of a customer access strategy. Go grab that. Go through those components with your team and start to build out. Where do we need to have service? Where might we cut, say, hours, or where might we consolidate queues, or maybe not have such an aggressive service level, and that's fine. That would make sense. There are those opportunities. But you only find them when you have the big picture in front of you.
Yeah. You mentioned something that I think sometimes we get not granular enough on, and that's service level. And I think maybe for the people that aren't necessarily contact center people, we should probably define service level first. But I'm curious, most of the time, I think companies look at service level at a monthly, did you achieve from a monthly standpoint or a weekly standpoint? Does it make sense to have different service level targets for different intervals or different days of the week, even if that means that my monthly now shifts?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and you're right. Most measured across too long of a time frame. Monthly is worse than worthless. Daily reports are bad news. Don't use them. So if I'm your contact center manager and I have a bad morning, we just don't have it's a Monday morning, or for whatever reason we don't have the resources we need, we miss service level. What am I going to do? I'm going to keep people plugged. Never mind training and projects and cross functional initiatives, all that. We'll have to postpone that because we've got to get service level back up to where it needs to be. That's the worst kind of management. So service level, which technically means X% of contacts reaching an agent within Y seconds. Different ways to measure that, but that's the basic expression. Service level has to be measured and managed by interval. Down to 30 minutes, or if you've got long calls, 60 minutes are fine, but down to the interval level, and look at how many intervals are you hitting service level. Don't try to make up for water under the bridge. Get on with what you need to do to build and strengthen your service for the customers you have now and tomorrow. Forget what happened this morning.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of contact centers don't do, right? I mean, they look at service level as just that's a KPI. That is whether you're an outsourcer or using an in-source team, that's usually kind of one of the top measures of, are we being successful? And I think it's interesting to kind of look at that metric and say, are we measuring the right thing? Maybe we should look at it differently and change how we look at it. And I love that idea of, what percentage of intervals did we hit that service level? And that gives you a clearer idea of how much of the day were you successful. And then you can look at, why weren't you successful in the intervals that you didn't hit? Was it because someone called out? Was it because there was a significant change in what we expected from contacts? We talk about airlines, right? we've been hitting on the airline thing. Certainly weather events change how many people are trying to reach a particular airline, because I probably am not calling in if I have no issues. But as soon as that flight gets canceled, I'm trying to get a hold of someone.
Yeah, that's right. And when you need to get a hold of someone, you need for the channel that makes sense to be available. Yeah, and just adding channels doesn't make sense. Adding the right channels. I remember doing some work with a HR services company, and they were troubled by some of the misses they were seeing in customer surveys. The overall results were still pretty good, but they're like, yeah, I don't know, we're hearing about problems here and there. And we're in this meeting room, and I had my laptop projecting in the front of the room, and someone brought up social media, and you guys have much of a presence there? Is that a service opportunity for you? So I went over to their Facebook site. I think we started there, and then went to Instagram and Twitter and some of the other sites, and I heard this gasp. They're alongside marketing messages of grandeur and the fun run this weekend and meet us in the park and all this, was a customer in all caps describing his problem with a simple password reset problem. He's going on and on and on. And this is alongside these marketing messages. So I went over to Twitter, and it was even worse there. And multiple customers, describing their problems, and every social media channel had something like that alongside messages from the company. It just seemed tone deaf. And so
Mhm.
one of the guys in this meeting says, "Well, that's awkward." Kind of broke the ice, and this very healthy discussion ensued. We're like, "Hey, we've got to be where our customers are, and why didn't he call us or use email or chat or some other channel that we have?" I don't know. He jumped on Facebook in that case, but if that's where the service issue arises, we probably need to be there. And they've since taken some really great steps to resolve that. But we've got to be where our customers are, it's not hard to figure that out. That's not a mystery. Get your customer access strategy out and look at alongside of that where they're trying to reach you now, and that gives you some pretty clear direction on where to invest and where you can move things around a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about spending more money to save money. What about cross training with my internal teams? What opportunities are there that you see often?
That is a really good idea. The powerful pooling principle is is an immutable law that states that any movement in the direction of consolidation of resources is going to improve traffic carrying efficiency. That's kind of a wonky way to say, look, cross train, pool groups, and they're going to be a lot more efficient than individual specialized groups as you can. Now, if someone's specialty means they can handle interactions a lot more effectively, then that's the balance here. So but a lot of cases I'll go in and I'll see natural groupings that if we did that cross training and really combine those groups, we'd see a lot more efficiency. Thinking of insurance companies that break out work by state and by different licenses and different customer types and this and that, and it can feel so sliced and diced that when all is said and done, you've got these smaller groups you're trying to manage that are very inefficient. So short answer is yes, cross train and pool where you can. That makes a ton of sense. By all means, do that by channel. To not only have different content that you're trying to handle, but then to break that down even further by here's our email group, and here's our chat group, and here's our social media group, and here's our phone group, and here's our back office processing area. It just makes no sense when we can get smart about bringing that work together. And the question of whether someone can handle this or that channel, they can. I can tell you so many cases where that was this huge debate, and then they enable and really equip their teams to start handling different channels, and it all works great. No one would ever go back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think often it's just a matter of, are we equipping our people to be successful? It's not, can they do it? Sure, they can. It's just a matter of, are you investing in them so that they can do it successfully? And if they need some work on written communication, or if they need some work on, just even how to set up things on their monitors so that they can access stuff properly. Yeah. And that may be something that's helpful regardless of the channel that they're supporting.
Yeah, that's right. And we all have preferred channels. There is nothing wrong with that. You like email and I like phone, perhaps. That's fine. But just carte blanche deciding we're going to have separate groups because they're different skill sets, that's not a good approach.
So we talked earlier about the company that changed the nozzle to get rid of 11% of their volume, essentially. That leads me to deflection. And I think when people think deflection, they think self-service, whether that's a chat bot or FAQs or whatever. But part of deflection can be identifying what's driving your volume and maybe fixing a problem if that exists, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of a large government operation that I've worked with recently, and they've invested in authentication in particular, because if they, their constituents are there forever, and so there's going to be repeat work. And if they can authenticate someone and make it easier for them up front, forget the 16 digits and your mother's birthday and everything to try to get in, but how can we make that easier? So they've invested in different authentication methods. One being voice biometrics. They need your voice print, so they've invested in their agents to help walk customers through this. Or it takes some handling time, but it's kind of a front loaded investment. And then once your voice prints in the system, the next time you contact them, it knows who you are. It can, in a matter of some split seconds, pull up information, any letters that you've received, any documentation that you might need to be aware of. It can route you to a certain area based on what the system knows about your recent history. All that makes it a lot easier on customers, and mitigates that work that would otherwise go to the wrong agent group, or that would require an investment just in trying to figure out who you are, let alone the next steps in that.
Yeah, and by the way, if anyone out there is interested in doing something like that, check out my episode with Matt Smallman. We talked about his book, Unlock Your Call Center, and it's exactly that, using voice biometrics. And that is, it's amazing, just from a handle time perspective, what you can do in just changing how quickly, once someone is talking with someone, they can actually start working on the issue, as opposed to making sure that they're talking to the right person. I mean, depending on your business, that can be a significant amount of time that you're spending with someone, just making sure, oh, I'm talking to Brad and not someone pretending to be Brad.
Yeah, that's right. So those are slow pitches over center plate, those kind of opportunities. And the other part of this is to make sure that we are interpreting what our values and our mission are the same. I remember working with a tech support operation that had, one rep had a 20 plus minute handling time, and everybody else was 10 to 12 minutes. And their director was like, is that too long? And this was the first hour I was there. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's the right number for everybody. I don't know. What's your mission? Well, come to find out, they flow charted these contacts, and he was the first to say, yeah, I'm going a little above and beyond. But so software B2B company, they love our software when they know more about it, and it helps their business, helps our mission. And he was right. I saw every head nodding. Rather than everyone's handling time on a contact by contact basis floating up to 20 plus minutes, they decided to take what he was doing and build it into cross-functional initiatives. So he became part of a group to develop user videos, YouTube videos, that sort of thing, on features. They set up a customer community where customers could help each other. They developed their knowledge management capabilities and the FAQs that their internal and external audiences could get to. All of that was a systematic, process way to go at what he was trying to do on a one-off basis. So his handling time migrated down to where everybody else's was. But he told me, now we're with these cross-functional initiatives that we all lend some hours to each month, we're helping everyone. And we're not just the customers that contact us, but those that never have to, because we can, point them to the video resources we have, and the beefed up user guides and the customer community and all these things. So he was on the right track. They just needed to harness that as an opportunity.
Yeah, customer education, I think, is one of those overlooked opportunities at deflection. When people think deflection, a lot of times they think chatbot. And we all have our opinions on chatbots, and there are some good ones and there are some bad ones. But customer education is a method of deflection, and there you're using someone who's already an expert And you're right. Instead of that one-on-one where he's only talking to a small segment of your customer base, you can utilize that person to now be speaking to a huge segment of your customer base on their own time as well. It's more convenient. They don't have to wait on hold. They can go and check out one of those videos and solve their problem. That's something that I think every company should look at. What can we do more in terms of customer education so that we decrease the volume that's coming in?
That's the smart way to cut costs. That is a great example of a smart way to go at this versus let's go faster and faster with handling time and what we're trying to do now. No, turn it on its head. What is that work, and how do we learn from it to really leverage those larger opportunities? That's exciting, and that's where the contact center becomes this incredible strategic asset to the rest of the organization. What are we learning? We're as customers, we're also over surveyed right now. We're just not going to sit down and give a bunch of information, if any at all. And we still need surveys. I'm not suggesting we don't, but the contact center is handling, real live interactions with real live customers. And what are they telling us implicitly and what they're actually saying about what's happening in their world as they experience our products and services? And what can we learn from that? Where else can you get that information? It's so powerful and it's so concentrated. So harnessing the contact center as this strategic asset that can help the rest of the organization really understand these opportunities and leverage them, that's exciting. And that's really the future of contact centers. There have been waves of tech disruptions, with each one bringing out a whole slew of gurus saying contact centers are going to go away. And there are more agents in the world today in more contact centers than at any point in history. But the smart ones are leveraging that opportunity. They're not just trying to reshape the pie. They're really leveraging those opportunities.
Yeah, you brought up something that I think when people hear, especially people in the industry, they hear voice of the customer, they think about surveys. And while surveys can be useful, they are problematic in some ways, right? Response rate, are you asking the right questions? And just the oversaturation that we as customers get with surveys, sometimes really bad ones as well. But every time we call or chat or send an email, there's data in that, right? That's the voice of your customer. They're talking to you, they're engaging with you. And so when you look into that data, you can find all kinds of gems about what people like, what people don't like, who your competitors are, issues with your product or your service that need to be fixed. Like, all of those things can be used to improve what you're doing, drive loyalty, drive revenue, and that's all coming out of the contact center.
Well, that's right. And surveys are one of dozens of ways to really listen to your customer. Voice of the employee is a huge source of input for voice of the customer. Talk to your employees. They'll tell you what's happening. And you're right. Every touch point is this incredible opportunity to learn. What's that data telling us? So surveys aren't going away. We need them, but there's so many powerful ways that need to sit alongside surveys to help us really, really listen to our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know one of the things that is most often looked at from a contact center perspective when you look at costs is the cost of labor, right? I mean, that's usually the biggest cost in any contact center. So workforce has a huge impact on costs. Can you talk to us a little bit about workforce optimization and opportunities that organizations have in that area?
Yeah, that's a really great question for anyone to keep asking with their operation. What should that look like? At the risk of sounding a bit repetitive, start with your customer access strategy. What are we trying to do? Who are our customers? And then what what resources make the most sense there? I did some work with a large water treatment organization. Think these huge city systems down to the water treatment system in a small restaurant, and every point in between. And it's one of those, you got to have it. It's got to work well. Maslow's hierarchy things, that's with food and shelter and safety, you got to have clean water.
Yeah.
So they were staffed by most of their agents were PhDs, uh, chemical engineering PhDs, very bright, very capable. The problem in their case wasn't that they were spending money to attract that level of competence, which they absolutely had to have. It was that they didn't understand, their team didn't understand priorities and timing. So, and I've seen that in telemedicine with doctors and nurses. I've seen it in other organizations that handle interactions with the airlines and high end systems, that sort of thing. We need you, but we need you in the right place at the right time, and that can sound like a contradiction. Hey, I've got a PhD in chemical engineering. You're giving me a schedule saying take a break at 10:15. That makes no sense. You hire me to make decisions. Yeah, but we've got to make decisions together, and they've got to be around what our customers need. So having that discussion, with this team in particular, like what do we do to go at this? How do we get you guys in the right place at the right time so you're there when your customers need you? And they came up with some really great, timing became a focus, and they came up with some really great approaches to more collaborative schedules. And yeah, they do make sense, and we do need to keep an eye on that demand as it ebbs and flows. So it was more of a ground up thing versus a workforce management top down. So get your team involved. Get your get your team on board with the cultural message that we need you. We need smart people to help us with this. What can we do as a team to make sure we're there at the right time? So back to the question, workforce optimization is this huge opportunity to not only get the right people in the right place at the right time doing the right thing, but to really build a culture around that puts a bounce in everyone's step. If you're, and we're not the only industry where timing is important. If you're a football, if you're a football player, you got to run the route. You got to be in sync with the quarterback, or it's not going to go well. If you're an actor, you got to be there when the line's up. There's so many examples of where timing's important. If you're a pilot, you got to do certain things at certain times, or it's not going to go right. So we're not the only ones with a time-driven environment. We need a culture where everyone understands that. And then alongside of that, the skill sets that we need, which are increasingly around, we need some very, very capable people. And we need to step up to the plate and make sure we're hiring very capable people. That all works really well when you put all that together.
Yeah, it's funny when you work with organizations where the contact center, and maybe that even belongs in quotes, right? The contact center, like that's not their business. Their business is something else, and they've insourced, and they often just don't. That's not their business, so they're not. They don't understand all of those little intricacies that professional contact center people who maybe don't have a PhD, but they they know call arrival patterns really, really well, and why it's important that someone takes their break at a particular time and not 15 minutes later. And being able to communicate all of those things to that organization so that they can look at things differently can make a huge impact in how they're able to service customers. And a lot of it's just thinking about the customer first, not
Yeah,
about
that's right.
us.
That's right. A contact center in its simplest definition is just a mechanism to enable customers to reach the resources and help they need when they need it. That's the key. It's when you need it. So we've got this whole industry built around, queues and metrics and routing and all these subsets of things that have to happen to it. But it's simply a customer needing the right help at the right time. That's all it is. So if we treat it that way, then things go a lot better. Build a culture around that, and you'll see the opportunity for your brand to shine through because you get that blocking and tackling working for you. You can concentrate on the things that really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a couple of things there, the culture piece, and we've talked previously about really just engaging your employees to focus on the right things. And I think when you bring those things together, right, a culture that's focused on customers and a culture that has engaged employees, when you talk to your team, a lot of these things that we're talking about will come from the team where they'll say, you know what, we need to change this. And if we did that, it would make right our ability to help our customers so much better. And sometimes that's really where the problem lies. It's not just in your processes and your procedures or your systems that you're using. It could be rooted in a culture that just really isn't focusing on the customers, or you just don't have particularly engaged employees because you're not working on that, fostering that environment.
Well, that was this water company. The morning I walked in, they're all in a large meeting room with their arms folded like this. Like, what's this customer service person gonna try to tell us here? And the turnaround was so dramatic, and their director contacted me, after this workshop. I was like, I want to show you some graphs, and retention got way better, and service level got way better, quality got better because quality is a follow service level. You can't deliver quality unless you get the customer to the right place. So everything moving, and he's like, thank you. And I'm like, I would love to take credit for this. All I did was prompt a little discussion. Your team came up with this, but they just had to see why this was all important. Why they needed to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right things, and how that enabled everything they were trying to do, which is deliver clean water to the world, one of the most basic needs we have. So when you tie contact center operations to the larger mission as a culture, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. I love that. I love that. Well, so again, as people are thinking about their budgets, maybe they're looking to cut costs. Do you have any other suggestions that we haven't talked about that you just want to throw out there and say, hey, make sure you look at this, or make sure you think about this as we head into 2023?
Yeah. Well, we talked about pooling agent groups. Definitely look at where you can cross train and maybe combine resources you have. We talked about, first and foremost, customer access strategy and the strategic value that the contact center can deliver. So how do you cut costs by learning and sharing that information and acting on that information across the board to improve products and services and processes? Definitely invest in your processes so they're getting better and cleaner, and they make more sense. Those are all great places to start. Staffing and scheduling and efficiency and all of that is, any organization can make improvements there, but make sure it's organic and that you're not trying to force, efficiencies where they're artificial efficiencies and really not producing what you want. work to reduce contacts at the source. Look at your drivers. Why are those contacts happening in the first place, and how can you work upstream to prevent them? All of those things in combination will lead you to the right kind of cost cutting, not the coarse kind that backfires.
Yeah, absolutely. So normally at the end of a podcast episode, I give a guest an opportunity to talk about where people can reach them, but I need to lay this out for people. Like, if you want to learn more from Brad, LinkedIn Learning has, I don't know, how many courses do you have out there, Brad, at this point?
Oh, thanks for mentioning it. I think a dozen now, and I just recorded another last week that I'm super excited about. It's on managing customer queues to the topic today,
Perfect.
and it's for not just contact centers, but anyone that has queues. Think of retail or grocery store or security line or anybody, but that was super fun to work on. The different kinds of queues and how it sounds dreadfully boring, right? It's super fun when you get into the different kinds of queues and how to manage them well. Just the whole world works better. So that was fun. So that'll be course 13 or 14, I think.
Yeah, lots of great content on LinkedIn Learning. Then you've got your website with your blog, right? The blog resources are great. I mean, one of the reasons that we decided to have this conversation actually came out of one of your blog posts that I like so much this summer. And I was like, hey, I really want to talk about this on the podcast. But you release blog posts very regularly, I think weekly. You can sign up for the newsletter, all kinds of resources on your website as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's on the website?
Oh, I appreciate you mentioning that. It's all no charge resources on the website. There's no gate. You don't have to leave anything. Just grab what would be helpful. There's a queuing calculator. There's I mentioned the customer access strategy framework. There's a document on the 10 customer expectations. There's a document on the 7 key metrics, categories of metrics that you need in your contact center. So I just I've been around this space a long time, and I love to just figure out ways I can be helpful. So most of that's organic, the kind of questions I'm getting, and I do what I can to, get things out there that might be helpful to your team.
Yeah, you have a ton of great resources. So I encourage anyone who's in the contact center space or adjacent to the contact center space or customer experience, whatever the case may be, go check out. It's bradcleveland.com, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, we'll put that in the liner notes so that you can quickly get to it. But seriously, there's so much great stuff there. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn and ICMI are great sources. The conference industry is beginning to kick back up the in-person versions, and there's always just a wonderful community that comes together there. So ICMI.com, my colleagues there do a great job. So and I've got a few other things on my website. There's a couple of books, Contact Center Management Fast Forward, and Leading the Customer Experience, a little broader take on things. So snoop around a little bit and ping me if I can be helpful. If you've got questions, I'd love to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brad, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining Next in Queue, and I really appreciate it. This has been a great talk, and I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of this.
Well, you are so welcome, Rob. Thank you. And thanks for the great podcast.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.